It's fantasy football draft season, and we're trying to find that juice in the middle of our drafts. In those middle rounds, we're trying to find that wide receiver who can get us over the hump, that can take over our league by storm. We're trying to find that running back who just comes out of nowhere once the starter goes down and becomes the guy. Today, we're looking at Jameson Williams, the upside dandy. We're going to be looking at his advanced metrics. We're going to see what the coaching staff has to say about him. We're going to look at what he's been doing during training camp and everything else. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're doing deep dives on these players every single day. We're also covering player lists every day, strategizing for your drafts every single day, leading up and after draft season, in season. It's the waiver wire, it's lineup setting, it's helping you win your leagues. Click that button right now. I'll be your resource throughout the season and in the off season as well. Jameson Williams, though, has been going off in training camp. I will have the clips up on the channel from training camp, and you will get to see what he's been doing, but he's looking a lot better in training camp. The beat reporters are saying it. The coaching staff is saying it. A lot of times when the coaching staff says it, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But when you look at the clips, go check out that video, he's winning in different ways. 11 versus 11, 7 on 7, not just versus air, but he's winning with good cerebral route running. Very assertive when the ball's in the air. And he's still winning with speed. And Dan Campbell, at the start of the offseason, had some good things to say about him.
We started this thing, back in April. And, you got phase 1 for a couple of weeks. Then we've been on the grass for 3 weeks in phase 2, which has been routes on air and fundamentals and individual and doing all this. And then we're 2 practices in, and if you said, give me one player that is the most improved from that start to finish in that time, JMO would be that guy right now. All right, he is a man on a mission, and I'm just going to leave it at that. All right, I'm going to leave it at that.
Jameson Williams, man on a mission, per the mouth of Dan Campbell. The thing about that, if you go look at the highlights from training camp, I know a lot of people roll their eyes at training camp highlights, but if you look at every single training camp highlight like I do, you'll see tendencies from players. And one thing is, you can tell that he's a man on a mission. He's very assertive breaking in and out of his routes, very assertive at the catch points, selling his routes as well. You can definitely see an uptick in his play. You can definitely see that he's looking better compared to years past. I know you probably didn't study the highlights from years past at training camp, but guess what? We did on the channel, and we can document that and say, yeah, he is starting to look better, starting to look improved. Will that lead to fantasy production? We're going to talk about that later, but the thing about that, he's not the only coach talking about it. Offensive coordinator Ben Johnson recently had some good things to say about Jameson.
Yeah, we started feeling it towards the end of last year, and he's taken that to another level in the springtime and so far here in training camp. He prides himself on bringing some juice to the offense, and we certainly feel it out there, both in the passing game, making explosive plays, but he also wants to be a dynamic blocker as well, which we really value. So things have started to slow down mentally for him. We've locked him into a couple spots, and as a result, his route tree's kind of grown. It's developed, and in his mind, there's nothing he can't do. And so far, we really haven't seen that either. I haven't seen anything that he can't do. So it's been fun.
He brings a lot of juice to the offense. We know this because of his speed, his ability to stretch the field. We've seen this with the Lions. We saw that at Alabama, a little bit at Ohio State. But also they're saying his route tree is expanding. We knew he was capable of doing that because he can break off routes and stop on a dime. We saw that when profiling him for college at Alabama going into the NFL draft. We saw that a little bit on the field, but he's a very dynamic wide receiver. You will see that in the training camp highlights. You will see him selling off the routes well, breaking off routes on the drop of a dime, and he's being more dynamic. He's taking a step forward. Does that lead to fantasy production? The thing about this, the Lions did not bring in any wide receivers of consequence this offseason. They brought in Donovan Peoples-Jones midseason last year. He played in 7 games. Didn't really amount to much production. We'll see if he can start climbing the depth chart. But we had a stacked wide receiver class in the NFL draft. One of the deepest wide receiver classes of all time. Probably about 20 wide receivers round 2 grades or better. And if they felt like they needed to patch things up, they would have dove into that well. Even in the middle rounds, there was talent. Even later, there was a little bit of talent. They would have patched things up if they thought they needed to. They would have. They would have got a good wide receiver on the cheap if they thought they needed to do that. They did not do that. Jameson Williams is there, and they're in 3 wide receiver sets 30% of the time, 2 wide receiver sets 27% of the time, 4 to 5 about 2% of the time. He's going to be on the field. He's going to be getting opportunities. But how many opportunities do you think? We will see. We will talk about that here in a minute. But Jameson Williams, the story of his NFL career, you got to look at that, because remember, we had that late ACL injury at the end of the season at Alabama. Really hurt the start of his rookie season. If you really want to think about it this way, last year was really a rookie season. He didn't really have one last year. It was him just prancing around on the field, getting some snaps and routes, just getting some run after the injury, after getting cleared to be able to go. And that was a late injury he had, so it took some time for him to get back on the field. Then we come back last year. We had some drops during this time, but we're still going to be on the field. They did not worry too much about that because they showed their hand by not bringing in any wide receivers of consequence. Got some opportunities on the field last year. Did not blow up, but still showed a little bit of promise here and there as a best ball DFS candidate for fantasy. When we look at the numbers here, look at the A dot up top here in the middle towards the other side of the screen. 16.0 average depth of target. The depth of the passes, how deep those passes are going his way on average. 16 yards per attempt. That is elite. That is top tier. That is explosive. The drops were high. He had 5 last year, but you're going to have more drops. If you got an A dot past 15, it's just going to happen. Those are tougher passes to bring in, but when you bring in one of those catches or a couple of those catches, because some of these are just straight moon balls downfield, 40 yards down there, shot, a big shot. You bring in a couple of those with that 4.3 speed, that high-end speed he's got there, you're talking about a splash play. 2 of those, you got lightning in a bottle. We'll talk about that production even more later. 24 catches last year, 354 yards, 2 touchdowns. Wasn't super productive, not what you want in fantasy, but a 16 average depth of targets, getting those deep shots, is something you want in your players with a hope and a prayer in some of your lineup decisions. And on top of that, we're going into year 3, further removed from the injury, and the reports are saying he's looking good. Remember last year in training camp, he got in some scuffles. The reports were not looking good. The reports were up kind of negative last year. We got glowing reports. That's letting us know that the media is somewhat honest out of Detroit. Remember the speed. We got 4.3 speed. We can get deep downfield. First round pick. We're comped to Will Fuller. Why is that important? Why is being comped to Will Fuller important? Because there's a scientific term that kids are studying in school right now. It's called the Will Fuller effect. These are wide receivers with deep speed who just stretch the field, get those deep bombs, and every time they bring in 1 or 2 in a game, splash performances. However, the down games are pretty frequent, but the upside games, you get a few of them every year, and they make you salivate. Some people love it, some people hate it, but the thing about that, it's real. It can win you some games. But when you look at Will Fuller here, you see a lot of upside games here. You see a lot of down games over the course of his career. Really, the 3 most productive seasons of his career. You see the spike weeks. People FOMO'd over those back in the day. People were chasing them for DFS, regular fantasy football, best ball, because of those upside weeks. There were about 2 to 4 games a year where he instantly won your week. However, every other game that season wasn't really doing it. That last season in 2020, that was his best year. He had a lot of spike weeks. He gave you a little bit of wide receiver 2 production, but people were chasing that because any moment, 30 fantasy points. And we could be seeing that with Jameson Williams. And now this is the area that I'm going to sell you for him or against him, because some of you are going to hate this. Some of you are really going to hate this. But some of you are going to love it. Some of you are going to love it. This is what you want. This is fun fantasy football where you're just setting a guy in your lineup and you're praying, especially if you're hurting at flex, if you're hurting on your roster due to injuries, bye weeks, and you're looking at what's on waiver wire, and you're looking at what you got on your bench, and you're like, should I pick up this wide receiver who's scoring 9 points per game, who won't win me my week, but might not lose it for me, or I start Will Fuller, a guy like him, that if he hits, the matchup's a little juicy, I win my week, it's over with, I'm good to go. Do I make that decision? A lot of you guys love that. But the thing is, when you look at the Detroit Lions, Josh Reynolds is gone, so there's going to be targets open in the offense. The negative part here is 51% of the targets last year went to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. That's going to make Jameson Williams a very spiky option in fantasy football if that remains that way, which it should. I do not see Amon-Ra St. Brown losing target share. If he does, it's just minimal. It's just minimal, and it could even increase. Sam Laporta should be somewhere around the same. One of the best tight ends in football. The thing about Jameson Williams is the average depth of target and him getting a little bit more targets this year. If he can push around 70 targets with a 16 average depth of target, that means there's going to be even more splash weeks out of him. This is one of the fastest paced offenses in the league. 26.5 seconds between snaps. One of the most plays ran in the league last year. They split the pass run scenarios pretty evenly, but still they throw it a good bit. They run a lot of plays. There's a lot of opportunity in this offense. This is a great opportunity for a deep threat like Jameson Williams. He's going to be stretching the field. He might be doing a little bit more. I expect the ADOT to even drop a little bit. Go look at the training camp highlights. He's breaking off routes around the boundary, the intermediate. That's an indicator that he's going to get more work on his route tree instead of the deep balls. The deep balls where the money is going to be made for Jameson Williams when he brings in a few of those. He's going to be a splash play candidate. He may not be consistent, but there are going to be opportunities for him during the season. You look at the ADP. This is best ball ADP, but this is ADP where there's money on the line, where there's thousands upon thousands of drafts happening. Mid-round selection here. Mid-round selection here. In home league drafts, though, the running backs are going to come up. Wide receivers like this, him, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, JSN, they're going to fall back a little bit. 8, 9, 10th round pick. Really who you're drafting with and how you're drafting in your league. But in his range, you're looking at upside wide receivers. Brian Thomas Jr., JSN, Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, all dart throws. This is the dart throw range at wide receiver. It could be around 8, 9, 10 in your league. Just take a mental note on that. Also, if you want to look at Jameson Williams but play a little bit safe, just look at him when you start feeling the ick at running back in this RB2 range. You got some good running backs here with Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, James Conner that can give you stable production, especially if you're light at running back when you're in the middle rounds. But if you're feeling icky at running back, you don't feel good about it, you want to go upside at wide receiver, this is the spot where you're doing nothing but upside at wide receiver. Maybe Cortland Sutton can be consistent. He usually is. But if you're looking for straight up upside that could come out of nowhere for you, this is the murderer's row right here between round 6 and round 7. We've been talking about this a lot. Jameson Williams is a part of that. We're going into year 3. Things are looking good. Deep threat city. Should be getting more targets this year. Should be. That doesn't mean he will. Should have some low points throughout the season. I guarantee you that. But there probably are going to be some high points if he stays on this trajectory. If he stays on what the rumors are saying coming out of training camp. We got some upside here. Again, best ball drafters on Underdog chase the upside a little bit more. He might be round 10 draft capital in your home league. However, I just suggest going after players like this once you start feeling ick at the running back position, even in the tight end position, and you got some upside flyers here to look at wide receiver here in the middle round. So you don't need him because he's too risky. He's too risky because you do not want to take a stab at him. But you do need him because you want the upside. You want the talent. You love the situation. You want to gamble on that. You want a wide receiver on the back end of your roster that's just sitting there. And you like the upside wide receivers because what I said earlier, when injuries hit, bye weeks hit, you don't want to play around with those wide receivers getting you 8 to 12 points per game. You want to play around with those wide receivers that get you nothing, or game-winning upside of 30 fantasy points, and that's how you want to play it. It's all on your preference and what you want to do. Jameson Williams is a preference wide receiver. If you like low games with boom games, Jameson Williams is your guy. If you want a steady Eddie, if you want to be a little bit more safe, you want to know what you're getting week to week, which is harder to do once you get in that point of the draft, he's not your guy. He's not your guy. Borderline end of discussion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. You better hit that subscribe button right now. I got more coming at you, more players every single day. We're ramping up here, if you believe that. Thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.